Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify Nation, and if you're new here, welcome. In this episode, we're going to look at object groups for the ASA. We'll be discussing an introduction to object groups and objects, configuring network objects, configuring service objects, object groups, and then finally configuring common object groups. This episode is part of my series on network security for the CCNA. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. Objects are reusable components for use in configurations. Objects can be defined and used in Cisco ASA configurations in the place of inline IP addresses, services, and names. The ASA supports objects and groups. If we go into our ASA and we go in global configuration mode and we type in object and we put our question mark for help here, we can see that these are different configuration mode or options. We can do a network or a service. Then we can show the object group help. Go ahead and just type in object-group with a question mark. And then you can see all the commands and options you can use for object groups on the ASA. To create a network object, use the object network global configuration mode command. The prompt changes to network object configuration mode. Oh, just a cough. Oh. The command is object network and then the name of your object. This is what you assign to the name of your object. There are several commands available inside the network object configuration mode. First one here is attribute. This is defined and used to filter traffic associated with one or more virtual machines. Next one is description. What we do is we enter a description of the object up to 200 characters in length. So once again, remember you have a maximum of 200 character lengths. Most descriptions I see are somewhere between 50 to 75 characters. Then you can put in the host, and this is the IPv4 or IPv6 address of a single host. Then we have FQDN, fully qualified domain name is the full address like what you type in a web browser. And this would be like www.example.com. You can also here specify v4 to limit the address to an IPv4 address or v6 to limit it to an IPv6 address. If you do not specify an address type, IPv4 is assumed. Then we have range. A range is a range of addresses. You can specify IPv4 or IPv6 ranges. Do not include masks or prefixes. So this is a range, not necessarily a network address. And then finally here, this is our subnet. This is where we'd specify a network address, and this assigns a network subnet to the named object. Here's an example for creating a network object. First thing, once again, we are in global configuration mode. Go ahead and type in object network and then the name of the object you are creating. This follows the standard naming conventions for lists and processes you set up inside of your Cisco devices. We use all capital letters just to make it stand out a little bit more. Also, remember the name is case sensitive. So when you refer to this, it has to be all capital letters. Capital E, capital X, all the way through to the E at the end, -1. Those all have to be capital letters. Once you go ahead and create that object there with the object network name, we can go ahead and specify our values. All we're going to do is specify what host is allowed for that object. Go ahead and type exit. Verify our settings. We can do a show run in any line that includes object. And right here we have object network example 1. So that's our name that we created from right up here. And then we have a host of 192.168.1.3. That is what we created right there. If you wanted to go in and change that, what you would do is you would enter in the object network names again, and then the name of the object you created. So that has to match here. And to change that, you just simply put in another configuration command dealing with the IP addresses. Here, the range command And so we're doing a range of 192.168.1.10 to .20, and that's going to overwrite that single host IP address. So it's going to overwrite it. When we exit out and we do a show run, we can see that now instead of doing a host, we have a range of addresses that we specified there. It overrode it. I hope you're liking this episode on object groups for the ASA. If you have the time, please leave a comment and let me know what you think about these object groups. You can also visit my website at KevTechify.com for all of my details and how to get these episodes in video and podcast form. Now we'll talk about the common service options available. Optional keywords are used to identify a source port or destination port, or even both. And what we can do here is we can use operators. And the common operators here are EQ for equal, NEQ for not equal, LT for less than, GT for greater than. You can go ahead and use all of these operators. You can even use the range command for this. And this supports configuring a port for a given protocol. If no operator is specified, the default operator is equal. Use the no form of the command to remove a service object. To erase all service objects, use the clear config object service, and that will get rid of all of your service objects. There are several ASA commands you're going to use with your service objects. First one here is service protocol, and this specifies an IP protocol name or number. The next one here is service TCP, and you put a source and a destination operator protocols in here, and this specifies the service object is a TCP protocol. We do the same thing here for UDP. We put our source operator port, our destination operator port, and once again this specifies that the service object is for the UDP protocol. We can also do ICMP, where we specify the ICMP type and optionally specify an ICMP code. And lastly, along with ICMP version 4, we can also do ICMP version 6. A service object can only be associated with one protocol and port. Here we have an example of creating an object service called serve-1. So we created that. Once we're in there, once again, notice our prompt does change. Now it says configure service object. We're going to go ahead and specify the service is TCP. Our destination is equal to FTP. Next line, we'll do the same thing. We'll do service TCP. Our destination is equal to www. So first one we did FTP, second one we did www. Remember that the service object name can only be associated with one protocol and port. If we do a show run object service here, we can see that our object service for serve1 is service TCP destination equals www, which happens to be the last one. What happened here was we entered in the first one where it was equal to FTP. When we entered in the second one, that second one overwrote the first one, and only the second one is the one that's active. Objects being grouped together to create an object group. By grouping like objects together, an object can be used in an access control entry instead of having to enter an ACE for each object separately. There are some guidelines and limitations to object groups. The first one here is objects and groups share the same namespace. What that means is objects and groups, if you name an object like object 1, you can't name an object group object 1 because they share the same namespace, they share the same database. You have to have each of them having a unique name. Second, object groups must have unique names. That kind of falls back to the first one. Each of your object groups have to have a unique name. And usually they do, because your name typically refers to what you are trying to do with that object group. The third one here, an object group cannot be removed or emptied if it's used in a command. So if you're using that object group somewhere in your configuration, you cannot remove it. The operating system looks and says, are you using it somewhere? If you're using it, you can't delete it. If you're not using it, well, they'll go ahead and let you do that. And then finally, The ASA does not support IPv6 nested object groups. So you can't, for IPv6, you can't have object groups inside of object groups. IPv4, you can do that, but IPv6, you cannot. There are 5 types of object groups. The first one is network. A network-based object group specifies a list of IP host, subnet, or network addresses. The second type is user. Locally created as well as imported from Active Directory user groups can be defined for use in features that support the identity firewall. The third type here is service. A service-based object group is used to group TCP, UDP, or TCP and UDP ports into an object. The ASA enables the creation of a service group object that can contain a mix of TCP services, UDP services, ICMP type services, and any protocol such as ESP, GRE, and TCP. The next type is ICMP type. The ICMP protocol uses unique types to send control messages. This comes from RFC 792. The ICMP type object group can group the necessary types required to meet an organization's security needs, such as create an object called echo to group echo and echo reply. And the final type of object group is security. A security group object can be used in features that support Cisco Trust Secure by including the group in an extended ACL, which in turn can be used in an access rule. To configure a network object group, use the object group network command. After entering the command, add the network objects to the network group using the network object or group object commands. Here we have an example. So we say object-group network, then we give it a name. Once again, remember this name needs to be unique between objects and object groups. So we're going to call this one admin-host, so admin host. We'll add in a description, and then we place our network objects in there. So network object, host, and then the host at this IP address, network object, host, and then at that IP address. So we have 2 hosts, 2 IP address in this object group. Then we'll add in a second object group. So object group network, and we'll call it all hosts. Once again, remember, convention says all capital letters, but it is case sensitive and it should represent what you are looking at. Once we're in there, we go ahead and add a description saying all inside hosts. Then we add in a network address, or so we add in a network object. This here is a network address with this subnet. So we're adding in a subnet of addresses, and we're also adding in the group object of admin host. So inside of our new object, we have our description. We're adding in a network object of all of our internal devices on this particular subnet, and we're also adding in a group object. This group object is the one we just created right before it. So we're seeing that we can nest in group objects. And remember, you only can do that with IP version 4. You cannot do that with IP version 6. Once you've done that, we can go ahead and exit out, and you can do a show run object command. Right here, you can see the 2 groups recreated, the 2 object groups. The first one is the admin host, gives us our description, and has our 2 IP addresses on it. Then the next object group is all hosts, gives us our network address, and including our nested group object of admin host. This is for doing networks. You can also configure an ICMP group object using object group ICMP type. And that would be up here. So object group. Now, instead of saying network, you would see ICMP-type. And then you could go ahead and give it a name, and you go in and add in the specific ICMP features you want to add in there. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on object groups for the ASA. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, please click the like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com. There you can find out how to get all of these episodes in video and podcast form. In the upper right is my playlist for my series on network security for the CCNA. In the bottom right is one of my favorite videos that I linked just for you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on network security for the CCNA. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.